I'm looking for my cue in the back. Was that a thumbs up? Oh, we're looking at the video.
Generations to come.
What the heck? Hi, I'm Beth Needle. I'm the Executive Director of the Lafayette Library and Learning Center Foundation. And on behalf of our Board of Trustees, I welcome you to this distinguished speaker series featuring Maggie Doyne. In the words of Andrew Carnegie, libraries are the kinds of places where ordinary people with different backgrounds, passions, and interests can take part in a living democratic culture. And in the book Palaces for the People, Eric Kleinenberg writes that even in a deeply divided culture, shared spaces provide the crucial connections on which democratic societies rest. And at the top of those lists of shared spaces are libraries. The Lafayette Library and Learning Center reflects the spirit of the Lafayette community, echoes the vision set forth by Mr. Carnegie, and reflects the wisdom of Eric Kleinenberg's writing. Tonight's introduction is a little different than I typically write, because while Karen Mulvaney will introduce you to our speaker and will be in conversation with Maggie, I think it's important for you to know a bit about Karen. Karen has been entwined in my life for close to 9 years. She is someone I honor and admire. I cry a lot. She's the founder and supporter of the library, a board member, an immediate past president. She created this distinguished speaker series. She's a sustainer, I don't cry, of all things libraries. Her superpower is that she is an author whisperer, and she is a beautiful writer in her own right. Karen tonight has brought many magical people our way, but perhaps none as inspirational as Maggie. I had the privilege of meeting Maggie when she visited the library with Ravi several years ago, and it's a sweet memory. Now's the perfect time for Maggie to return to the Lafayette Library. It's a time when our community needs inspiration and strength, and a time when we need to ensure that I don't fall apart, and that this library and all libraries remain a place of solace, comfort, and belonging. I hand it off to Karen.
I promise we're not doing hard rock. I know, are we good? Can everybody hear that? I mean, not the other thing. Thank you, Beth, wherever you went, and welcome to everybody. I guess I want to just look at you all because it's really quite precious to be together. After a long time of being separate. So I'm going to thank you for wearing your mask to help keep us all healthy and as COVID-free as possible. Thanks to the library and the foundation staff for the daily work. And to every library donor, of which you all are a part now, whether you've given the past, present, right now, because you're sitting here, you're participating. You make this program and others like it, as well as all library resources and services possible. Also to Arinda Books for being our partner tonight and for being a wonderful local bookseller. What would we do without that?
Yeah.
I don't know, that's feedback, man. I don't know
That
what's
is
happening.
feedback.
I-
Okay.
Technical support. Tonight, we are incredibly fortunate to have Maggie Doyne with us. Maggie is a dear friend, and as many of you know, she is the founder and CEO of Blink Now Foundation. a nonprofit located in New Jersey that helps support children and families of Surkhet, Nepal through a variety of ways, including the Coppola Valley School, which is a nursery through 12th grade, a wellness clinic, including a mental health clinic and counseling center, and a women's center providing vocational skills and empowerment training. And oh, Maggie is mother to 60 children. Looking really good for that, right? Maggie's story of Blink Now begins 17 years ago when she postponed going to college and at age 18 chose instead to take a gap year to better understand herself and the world in which she was living. In the ensuing years, she has been recognized globally for her work, including being honored by the Dalai Lama, named a CNN Hero of the Year, though really, quite frankly and truly, it isn't honors that she regards as most important. Her dedication to helping children have their most basic human needs met, food, clothing, shelter, education, and most importantly, a loving home, are her true pursuits. Please help me welcome Maggie here to celebrate her newly released, beautifully written book titled Between the Mountain and the Sky.
I think it's my mic. There we go. I think it was my microphone.
I think you're okay.
Yeah. Oh, thank you all. Thanks for having me here. This is a really special place to me.
So Maggie, just to give context, too, of how we know each other. I learned about Maggie some 13 years ago through a New York Times article written by Nicholas Kristof. And after that, I wrote to you. You were the age of my children, and we began a long friendship. In 2014, with her master's degree in education, Tom and my daughter Meg traveled to teach at Maggie's school, the Coppola Valley School, as part of the Coppola Valley Fellows Program. While she was there, Tom and I came to visit, and we were able to see the school as it existed then, and along with the Women's Center, the Children's Home, and the newly purchased land where the recently opened, fully sustainable school now exists. Maggie, your being here is an honor and a great joy. Your book, Between the Mountain and the Sky, is a stunning work. It is honest and raw, a harrowing and incredibly beautiful writing, a full telling of heartbreak and sharp, often bottomless grief, and also at its core and on every single level, it is an unbreakable, concentric love story, which includes everyone connected with Coppola and Blink Now, past, present, and future. It's a heart-opening, life-affirming, shining example of what is possible when we love with our whole hearts, when we see with generous eyes, when we love regardless of boundaries, and we care for each other, and especially for our children, all the world's children. Bravo. So, tonight, take us back to the beginning of you. What was the constellation of your family? Where did you grow up? What were your days like as a teenager?
Well, I was a New Jersey suburban teenager. So what do you picture? I was in my ponytail, playing soccer and lacrosse. I grew up with a mom and a dad and a little blue house on a cul-de-sac, 2 sisters and a dog named Sophie. I had a trampoline in my backyard and a soccer goal, of course. And I loved school, and I babysat on the weekends for this little girl right here, who's no longer little. I babysat, I loved children, I was a camp counselor, and as all suburban New Jersey girls, we are kind of like groomed and have the privilege of going to college. And like that's kind of what you set your intention towards. And it's not only like you're going to college, but it's what college are you going to? What college are you going to get into? What college are you worthy of? Which brand, which name? And I think if I had to go back to like that time of before, I was a happy child. But as I kind of got older and entered adolescence and then like 10th and 11th and 12th grade, it became very much about like, where am I going to go? How am I going to get in? Do I have the right SAT score? Have I taken the right courses? And preparing myself for this next step. I had college like written on my forehead. I guess that was me. But a very loving, happy childhood with all of the things in the world.
So a little bit like our town, our kids, right?
Very much so. Very much.
And so how ultimately, when a decision came to you and you said to yourself and then ultimately to your parents, I don't want to go.
Yeah, so growing up in a community like this, it kind of turns into a pressure cooker in a way. And I started to feel that of like, oh, where am I going? And my focus was very external on this thing, this path, this like point that if I could get there, that would be what success looked like. And all of a sudden, I just woke up one day, and it was at the time when all of these decisions had to be made, and I was like, wait a second, I don't really know who I am on the inside. And I know I'm supposed to go to college, I know I'll get there, but I don't really know my purpose. Like, what am I supposed to study? Who am I really? And I think it was that initial, like, stopping and taking a moment to just listen in and check in with here that made me start to think about an alternative path. And it was just a year. Like, I just thought, oh, I'll take a year, I'll take a gap year. And I started looking into programs. Luckily, my family was really open to that. And the initial dream and vision was like, I'm gonna go travel and see the world outside of New Jersey and what's out there. Because I didn't know the world outside of New Jersey. It was a very like bubbled, sort of one-dimensional view of the world. And so I was just like, I wonder what's out there. And that became the first semester. So we, packed up my backpack and had my little passport on my, around my neck, and set off with 15 other kids, 17 to 19 years of age, to have this culturally immersive, fun travel experience.
And you basically went all over Asia.
Oh yeah, and I did not set out to be like, I'm gonna go help kids. It was very like, I'm gonna go surfing, and I want to do an outdoor survival course, and I'm gonna learn how to meditate with Buddhist monks and organic farming, and it was
And you
just
did some of that.
all of it.
Yes.
It was very experiential. I got my belly button pierced. That is literally who I was. I was like, I'm going to get my belly button pierced. So it was just about fun and about exploring the world. And I think in our culture, maybe this resonates with the room, but our teenagers and our youth have lost that rite of passage. That who am I? What should I do in this world with this, as Mary Oliver says, one wild and precious life? What's out there for me? And we don't have that in our culture anymore. And that ability to travel and that freedom and that questioning is what led me ultimately to the next step after the belly button, which was to India, northeastern India.
And so what happened there for you?
So I knew I loved kids, and I knew I was really good with kids. And I was like, I just want to be of purpose, and I want to work with kids and explore this next part of the journey. Can you just put me somewhere where I can be of use? And I ended up in northeastern India, and kind of fast forward, and geopolitically at this time, there was a civil war happening across the border to the northeast. And so what we were witnessing on the India side of the border was millions of migrant and refugee families and children as a direct result to the civil war happening across the border. So I got to know the Nepali people, and again, that questioning of like, where's everybody coming from? Why are we intercepting these cases? On the India side, we were dealing with human trafficking, child labor, refugee families sleeping under pieces of plastic. And I was meeting kids and young people my age having fled being a child soldier. So I ultimately became friends with this young gal. Her name was Sunita. And Sunita, unlike me, knew exactly where she wanted to go. She was like, I'm going to college, I'm going to be pre-med, I'm going to become a doctor, but I don't know where I come from. I left my village when I was 8, and I don't know my identity. I don't remember. I'm losing my memories as a child. And so that first trip to Nepal was to go find Sunita's home, tucked away in the foothills of the Himalayan mountains.
And so you were still 18 years old, right? 18, 19?
Still 18, and we're like, pack up our backpacks, get on a bus. Ultimately, the road ended, and we looked
the bus
up.
was, I mean, we're talking now several days, right?
Oh, yeah, multiple days through the border on a pony cart, crossed over again up into the mountains to the end of the road, and then it was the end of the road, so we got out and we started walking on a footpath. And at the end of 3 days, we looked down and she saw her home, and her memories came flooding back, and her home had been converted into a Maoist rebel base camp.
Wow.
And the schools had all shut down because, as we know, war and violence affects women and children and families and creates generational poverty and trauma and cycles of violence in this world. So it was seeing that through her eyes and really feeling it, but at the same time, you know, it's raw civil war. You see these effects of it all, but I also just fell in love with the people, and it was beautiful, and there was strength and resilience and spirit and like connectedness. And so I fell in love with that part of Nepal too, and I was just like, maybe there was a sense of home for me there.
Wow. Did you feel a sense of danger also?
Did
you realize
yeah,
at that time, like,
you know,
you couldn't speak the language, right? And
no, I was relying on Sunita. There were definitely like Maoists and like tires on fire looking back. Now that I know what I know, and I'm a mother, and I've heard my mom's like whole narration of the story, I'm like, oh yeah, that was a big thing. But at the time, we were just two gals, like, let's go discover this thing. So yeah, I think at the time I didn't feel scared, but again, the 18-year-old brain, I don't think I knew what I didn't know, which is a major theme. This whole book is like the things I didn't know that I had to learn.
well, and sometimes, right, that really serves us well, because you don't block out the possibilities of what you might be able to do or where you might be able to go, which
Right?
is a theme, I think, in the book too.
What would you do if you had no fear? What would you do if you had no knowing of what was
Right.
to come? And writing the book, I think it felt like such a journey, and that I could go back and hold that 18-year-old's hand. And I knew what she was about to go through, but she didn't know. And it was really therapeutic to go back and ask those questions of like, why wasn't I scared when the Maoists like shook us down for money and tried to take my backpack? Like, but I wasn't, and that's why it was such, you should all write. Just journal and write and remember, because you go back and you're like, oh my gosh, it's the only way to take you to your mindset at that time.
Yeah, that's an extraordinary writing and remembering and sort of absorbing what you know now that you didn't know then. But if you knew then what you know now, you would have stopped, most likely. Okay, so can you tell us a little bit about Taupe and your co-founder, and how did that happen? So you came back from Oda, and what came next?
So I come back from Oda, I'm walking across the dry riverbed, I look up and I see children breaking rocks, and you can hear the clank, clank, clank of children taking huge rocks and breaking them into hundreds of pieces, and they were selling a bag of gravel the size of a body, probably, at the end of the day, for about $1. And that's how children were surviving in this particular region. And I just had this moment, if you ask, like, well, what was the moment that you decided you wanted to stay? It was this moment here, and I was just like, it all kind of came crashing down. There were 1 million orphan children in the country. There was hunger. Nepal is the most food deficit region in the entire world. And we'd seen the stories of child labor and child soldiers and families separated. But on this riverbed, I'm just like, what are we doing as a human family? How is this okay? That we're watching, I'm looking at a 5-year-old breaking rocks all day on a riverbed. And there was this moment of like, I want to stay. I want to figure this out. A little girl named Hema, who you know, said, Namaste, Didi. And I was like, okay, I can't do anything about this whole problem, but maybe I can do something about Hema. So in that journey, I start to question and meet people, and I knew through reading and trying to kind of ask the questions that I had about development and why have we failed and how do we have 152 million orphan children in the world. I knew that one of the keys would be to like figure that problem out, and I knew that I didn't have the answers. And in that process, I met Tope. And Tope was an orphan himself. He actually comes from Kalikot, that region that the Civil War took its stronghold. And he'd lost his dad when he was 1, his mother when he was 7. He lost his sister. He survived on pumpkin most of the time. And when he was 9 years old, he went to India to work as a child porter. And he has this incredible story. He rises the ranks, he teaches himself how to read. He was a 3rd grade dropout, and has this amazing, successful story, but he's in India. And he's like, I need to go back to Nepal and figure this out so that no child goes through what I went through. And Tope and I meet, and we instantly connect. And we're both kind of in the same mindset. He has his wife, Kasum, and his 2 children who are coming of age. And there's a armistice. The Civil War has kind of paused. And Nepal is finding its way to peace in 2005, 2006. And he immediately comes on for the journey and is like, yes, let's do this. I'm in this with you, and we're going to figure this out. But the initial step was to try to put these children into school, because we knew that education would be part of the answer. So it was like, one day, let's walk across this dry riverbed and not see a single child breaking rocks. And ultimately, that's how it all began.
And so Tope obviously was fluent in Nepali, and you still were not, is that right? And
Oh,
so
yeah.
he did, like in terms of your communication and how you managed, did he take that lead? My goodness. Did he take that lead, and he was sort of your person that did the communication, and then you would strategize, and he was fluent in English? And
Yeah, we kind of started to look at the root of this problem. And the question that we went in with was, how does a child thrive and grow in community? What are the things that they need? And he spoke the language. He's very respected. He's funny. He's personable. Everybody loves him. And we built a team. Tope had a really good sense of people and the people we would need to take on this cause. And people also kind of came our way, and everyone knew what the answers were. Of how to bring about change in the community, the change they wanted to see in their community. I knew right away that I didn't have to go and say what I thought. Everybody knew what they wanted. And it was kind of this really interesting time in the country where people were starting to come back, people had hope. And just timing-wise, we chose Circuit because it was at the hub sort of center of it all.
And so when did you call your parents and say, oh, by the way?
So Tope and I find this piece of land for sale for $5,000. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have exactly $5,000 in my account from babysitting from the time I was 11. It's a sign, like I have to buy this land. It was just a dry patch of dirt with a little single measly tree on it. And I was like, that's it. And I go to a rickety old phone booth, and I call up my mom and dad, and I say, can you send me over my babysitting money?
What a phone call that was, I'm sure. Wow.
And they said yes. After a very long conversation back and forth, they're like, yeah, we're going to send it. It's your money. And go for it. Then, of course, I ran out of money because that was the land. And we had to dig. We all came together and we sketched up the concept of a home. What we realized is that kids can go to school and dream of an education. That's up here on the hierarchy of needs. But if you're an orphan and you've lost everything in the world, you need to be warm at night. You need to have clothes. You need to have clean water to drink. I mean, a huge portion of kids weren't living to the age of 5. Simple things like vaccinations, nutrition, food, basic safety, basic human rights. Education's up here. So we were like, okay, turn it down a few notches. We need a home first, like a home base and a center. We both hated orphanages. We're like, this home's going to be yellow, and there's going to be kites in the sky, and there's going to be marbles, and there's going to be a soccer goal, and there's going to be a garden, and there's going to be puppies and music playing and food on the stove all the time. And this is going to be the childhood that every single child in the world should have and deserves, because a loving childhood is the greatest gift that a child can have. And now, all these years later, as a mother, I know with every cell in my body that when you can care and nurture a child, there's a direct correlation to peace. And I just believe that if we can find a way to care for our children, our most sacred, valuable, innocent beings on this earth, that we can have peace in the world. And that's my hope. But that's how I got 60 kids. Oh, God.
I know, we're very explosive on stage. Okay, so tell us about a day in the life at Coppola. Okay, we're not doing...
No idea what's going on.
What? Okay, which wire? Okay.
I don't know.
Stop that.
Okay, what was the question?
Tell us about a day in the life of Coppola now. So you've built that home.
So all of the things happened. I came back, I started babysitting and house sitting and dog sitting, and we did a garage sale. We raised $20,000. The whole local community in Mendham came together. I went back, we built the home with the community. It was all of those things, kites in the sky and marbles, and children came into the home, and the vision started to come alive. And we started to slowly and organically, step by step, look at the issues in the community and draw a little circumference and start chipping away one step at a time. Soon that evolved into a school, a women's center, because women are the cornerstone of all of this work and really build communities, mothers, and also looking at how do we prevent a child from becoming an orphan in the first place. And a medical clinic. Kind of started looking at all the pieces. As we started, the issues kind of presented themselves. And we're like, oh, wait, clean water is critical. You know,
Talk a little bit about that, because didn't you have, everybody was getting sick all the time.
Oh yeah, you'd turn the faucet on and first of all, water only came for an hour, and it was always at 2 a.m. It was just brown sludge. And I mean, I was this girl from New Jersey. I never had thought about power. The electricity was out all the time. We didn't have internet.
And you rarely had power. You had power intermittently.
A few hours at a time. And I mean, luckily this was the time before smartphones. Now, I mean, how would a kid survive? But yeah, so we just started chipping away, one issue at a time. We're like, oh yeah, wait, food is so critical. We need school lunch and nutrition to be able to retain kids, and an after-school program. There was no girls' soccer. We started the first ever girls' soccer team. An after-school program. I don't know.
There's a lot of energy. I don't know. So you start an after-school program.
And a library. I grew up in the library. And the children, one by one and family by family, we just watched their own healing take place. There's a counseling center, a health and wellness clinic, and slowly it revealed itself. Like as we looked at the issues on the ground, we learned from others, we looked at the issue of development and how we thought it failed, how we could do better. We just tinkered and we learned from other people, and we thought to ourselves, like if we can figure out how to do this in a post-Civil War nation, in the most food deficit region of the world, with the highest child and maternal mortality rate in the world, with instability and earthquakes and natural disasters, maybe it could be done. All the things.
All the rain.
Maybe it can be done anywhere. And we kind of set out to prove that thesis. And to go back to the beginning of education, it kind of, my own education and that journey and that passion really took on a life of its own. And I started to feel that sense of purpose and that sense of passion and that sense of like, how do we figure this out? How can I give every child some semblance of a childhood that I had, some access to opportunity that I had? Because I kind of looked at me and how the privilege that I had and the chances that I had, the people who believed in me. And it wasn't about recreating New Jersey and the suburban New Jersey childhood. It was about bringing the culture of Nepal alive and doing it in a respectful way. But the themes were all the same: love, nature, healthy, nutritious food, music, books, joy and fun, and that was it.
So the day starts, and you have how many children in the home now?
Probably like, now it's like, we just kept going up and up, 26. We'd wake up, there's tea, there's breakfast, there's kids skateboarding by and fighting over marbles and riding bikes, and then the Coppola Valley school bus comes by, everybody's putting their ties on.
Because the school now is not located where you walk to it.
It used to be that you could walk right across the street, but over time, if you read the book.
I've done that several times.
And then the kids go to school, and we run all of the beautiful programs, and then they come home, and we do homework. It's just a typical, like, family. We have dinner at the table. We had to do family satsang.
Very large family. But talk a little bit about satsang, because having been there, it was one of the most magical times of the day, the most centering and rooting times. And I think it's like a sacred practice that you do. And I think it really grounds the children and sets them up for their sleep time, but also how they wake in the morning.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so the actually framing of the book, and no one will notice this but me, is that the prologue is the morning and the epilogue is an evening. So the whole book is framed as a day in the life and a life itself. And satsang is a Nepali, Hindu, Buddhist cultural tradition where you sit in circle on the floor and you hold hands, you sing, you dance. We kind of took on our own adaptation of it, but we basically, as the family grew to like from 5 to 7 to 15 to 27 to 48, we would do this every single day. It actually started because we never had power, and we just have like a little candle, and we'd all sit in a circle, and I didn't speak Nepali at the time, and we'd like sing row, row, row your boat, and they'd sing Nepali. And that was the ritual of satsang. And we still do satsang every single day. We dance, we sing, we celebrate a birthday, we like hold hands in meditation, we talk about the day, we talk about family issues we need to talk about. It's amazing.
That's what I thought was so amazing, like the opening up of the floor to every single person in the family. Okay, I swear I'm not doing that. I don't know what's happening. That just the equality that existed really in the room.
Yeah, like the teenagers even, I'm trying that. the teenagers getting so into it, and then the 2-year-old that's just learning to like toddle around is dancing at the center, and there's joy and there's laughter, and sometimes there's sadness, sometimes there's discipline or like a hard conversation, but it's just creating that space for family and for circle and for talking, and we do family game night, we do all of the things. It's amazing. Yeah.
In the book, and because I know you and I know your story, you largely grew up alongside the kids. And is there anything you would like to talk about the children then and now? You know, what's Hema up to, and Nisha, Krishna? What is sort of the arc of what's going on with the kids now that began really when you were all so young?
Yeah. So ultimately, I became a mother, and, you know, they all became siblings to each other. We became a family, and they started to grow up. And first, they were 5, and then they were angsty tweens, and then they were teens, and then we started to think about preparing for adulthood and college, and time goes on. We were raising children. Nisha was the first. And Nisha was the first to come into the home, and she skipped 2 grade levels. She was so eager and so smart, and she read the whole Harry Potter series in 3rd grade, and she was this incredibly high-achieving gal, and she was the first one to get into college. And
What was that like for you?
I mean, so at this point, my oldest is going to college, and I find out that I'm pregnant with my first biological daughter. And I had to like figure all of this out. And Nisha finds out that she got something called the Davies Scholarship, which is this full ride. She's so smart. Was taking all the exams. She just flourished. And she gets into college. She gets the Davies Scholarship. I'm pregnant. My oldest is getting ready for college, and she calls me up, and she says, "Mom, I have to tell you something." And I'm like, "What? What is it?" And she said, "I know I got into college, I know I got the full ride, but I want to take a gap year."
Oh my.
And she did. I dropped her off at Stanford. She did a global citizen year.
Right. I forgot.
And it all, you'll notice in life that things happen in circles, and they come very full circle. And my reaction to that was like, "Ooh, are you sure?" But now, I mean, fast forward, and this isn't a spoiler alert, but there's not a single child on the riverbed breaking rocks. And we have 166 of our kids in college. So I never got to go. Another spoiler alert, I never went back to college. But I got to do the whole thing, go to Target and pick up the stuff for the dorm room and do the drop-off. And I was the mom sobbing in the parking lot. Watching a child go from infancy to a young adult in the world, there's nothing more magical. And now they're becoming who they are. And actually I started to write because time goes so fast. It's like when you have a baby, it's like watching a little time machine. And all of a sudden they're walking, and then their first tooth is coming in, and then their tooth is falling out. And then the holidays, it all just melts into life. It becomes a life. And then I just wanted to capture it all and feel it all. And it's so impermanent and so temporary. And that's the most beautiful thing about motherhood. It's your heart living outside of your body, as they'll all say. And I had 58 kids. So I just wanted to remember it all.
You have to pace yourself. You really have to pace yourself.
I wanted to really remember it all and hold every moment and remember the little things and remember the times they drove me crazy and the times that there was a stomach bug that came through the house and I was up all night cleaning up throw up, and remember the first boyfriend. And so I wrote as a way to freeze time, as a way to just remember. And also I think I was so sensitive about what they had lost and the unthinkable human tragedies that they'd suffered. They'd lost their whole families. They'd witnessed the worst that this world has to offer. They'd lost siblings and parents, and the worst thing in the world had happened already when they're 5 years old. I mean, working as a domestic servant, sleeping in the back of a hotel, discarded, breaking rocks on a riverbed. And so I felt like there was so much to make up for, and I knew that I wouldn't be able to tell them everything about where they came from, and that they would have to process that trauma with support in their own ways. And so, there was a sense of wanting to be able to tell them what I could and share what I could and remember the little things. Krishna, he calls himself top 5, because he was top 5 when he came into the home. He's at Notre Dame right now on a full scholarship. But he told me the day that he came, this one memory that he had of his mother before she passed, and she would sell oranges by the side of the road. And I wanted to remember that just in case, like, I could tell him that later in life. And
So partly you're describing why you have written the book, right?
yeah,
That's like,
that was why.
yeah, and
That's my why.
the love letters that you had also written and have captured for every child, right? You've written to every single child a very specific love letter, which I think is extraordinary too, so that they have that from you. And what you've created for them, I mean, they've lost what they have lost, but they have gained something also that is extraordinary and remarkable.
Write your children love letters.
Yeah,
Yeah, the little things, the things
Yeah,
you
I
want
think
them to know.
a brilliant thing to do, really. And we all think we're going to do it, and then sometimes we do, and sometimes we don't, I have to say. But writing it down is really, really meaningful.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about Jantara?
Yeah.
And then I'd love you to, if you want to read, maybe talk a little bit about who she is.
So, Jantara, where do we begin? I had this false narrative in my 20s, and maybe even into my teens, that if you worked hard enough, if you could do everything right, all the things, just do all the good in the world that you could, keep your chin up and fight as hard as you can, and work as hard as you can, the hustle, that things would just work out. And that Jantara was the first kind of loss that I experienced, one of the first losses. And it's a chapter called Moon Star, because Jantara means moon and star. Her name was Jantara, which is a beautiful Nepali name. And I met Jantara in a rural Himalayan village, and we happened to cross paths. And she was probably about 8 years old, and her whole face had been consumed. Her eye was protruding many, many inches beyond her face, and she had this really huge facial deformity. And she'd kind of been cast away from the village. She was considered cursed, and she was in the back of her room. And she had also been blinded by this mass tumor. It was in her orbital kind of brain center that was affecting her vision, but we didn't know how bad. And so in my hustle, let's figure this out, we met, we connected. She was magical. And I took pictures. We got CT scans. I brought her back down from the village. She did her first bus ride. She saw electricity for the first time. And ultimately, I find this organization in London called Facing the World, and they do facial and brain surgeries. Actually, the same doctors who operated on Malala. They're the best in the world. And we got all the scans and all of the things. And on her third surgery, she went to school. We were restoring her vision. Long story short, on her third surgery, she had a bleed out. They put a shunt in, and she wasn't able to be rescued, and she died with me on the table. And I had the power of attorney, and we had to make that decision, and we watched her pass away. And that was kind of the first hit of oh, you can try, and sometimes you fail. And that's Jintara's
Do
story.
you want to read the letter or no? You don't need to.
Well, I think I can read a little bit of it. I think it was the first love letter I wrote and why I started to write love letters. It was this time of like grief and despair, and I didn't know what to do with my feelings. Again, like using writing to process and like just the cathartic power of it. Where should I read the whole thing, you think?
Read as much as you want. So this is a long letter that's written to Jintara as a way of Maggie's talking to her, even though she's gone. So you can read whatever portion you want.
Okay. Dear Jintara, it was just a week ago that Kate and I packed up our backpacks and left your village. Kate brought your school backpack from London filled with all the gifts you chose for your family. I packed our clothes, a jar of peanut butter, my laptop, and one bright yellow photo album inscribed with the words, "Sweet memories," and pictures of you, my dear darling girl.
You don't have to do it.
You wouldn't have liked the bus ride. Those big red double-decker buses in London spoiled us for sure. I almost forgot what a Nepali bus ride was like until I was sitting on it, jam-packed with people, animals, interesting odors, mostly broken seats, lots of dust, and not an inch of paved roads. I think our butts were jumping off the seats more than they were actually sitting on them. We are definitely more of the red double-decker comfy cushion seat type of gals, aren't we, Jay? What can I say? It was actually somewhat of a relief when the road ended, and we had to get out and walk. A relief until the end of the second day of walking, when our legs felt like rubber, and we got to the base of Mount, you know exactly which mountain I'm talking about. And it looked like we were about to climb Mount Everest. You should have seen the look on Kate's face when I told her that, yes, that was the one we had to climb. Priceless. Everywhere we stopped, each little hut and home, village people asked about you. They all remembered you, Jintara, how you had walked the same path just a few months before, on your father's back, wrapped in a shawl, singing the sweet songs. You sure knew how to make impressions on people, didn't you? Even after just a moment in passing, people remembered you and thought of you while you were gone. When Kate and I finally made it to the top of the last big mountain, the wind was blowing and the sun was shining. We looked down into a big green valley with patches of snow and a small, fresh spring running down the side. And we started hiking, down, 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 stone by stone, step by step. And it was beautiful and all worthwhile. I got off on the wrong track and hit a huge slope of mud. I started sliding, and before I knew it, I was on my butt, covered in mud with nowhere to go. I'd get up and start sliding again, and falling again, and get up and start sliding again. Kate just about peed her pants laughing, and Daju kept yelling about my computer. We stayed in a tiny mud hut on the side of a mountain with a little old lady who Kate said reminded her of a witch. The woman gave us a piece of plastic tarp to sleep on, and our bodies were so sore. We didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so we just huddled close together by the remnants of a fire to keep warm. I'm pretty sure the last thing Kate said to me before I fell asleep was, "I think there are lice climbing all over my body." We woke up at dawn the next morning and kept going down and down and down some more until finally we came to your Oda. We sat on a rock and I pointed out your house to Kate, my sister, noting the fresh grass roof that your brother and dad had just put on a few weeks ago, waiting for your arrival. Your mom and dad were sitting inside by the fire, just the two of them, and when they saw us, they started to cry, and so did we, because we miss you so much, and it's so hard and so painful not having you here. There were no words, just tears and sobs. I'm going to skip a little bit. In the morning, we ate fresh fish and your favorite beans, fresh greens, black tortilla, potatoes, and red rice. All your favorite foods that you'd always talk about missing so much, harvested by your family. You were right about the water in Calicote. It does taste fresher and cleaner and cooler. I noticed the taste of the water this time, and I love that water too. I feel your presence in every step. I can hear your giggles, and Kate and I both swear that we wake up to you sleeping in between us every night. Your story is far, far from over. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
What strikes me about that passage, what you've done, is the ability that you have to have brought to life the children that are still alive and well, but also the losses that you've sustained. They're just so vibrantly alive, and you've done that, and you will keep them alive, and your book is a testament to them. I think it's, again, the power of writing and the power of putting something down. It's tangible and lasting and will forever be. So you've sustained a lot of hardship for sure. Do you want to talk about one brave thing in the green speck?
Oh my gosh, sure. So there's a lot of heartbreak and a lot of loss, and I think one of the themes in the book is just overcoming and figuring out a way to move on when you don't feel like you can or when you want to quit. The push and pull of just failure and loss, and again, that young person that thinks everything is possible and it's all going to be okay, and then at some points, and at one particular point it just wasn't. I lost also my 2-year-old son in a horrible, tragic accident, which I write about in the book as well. And this happened at a height of my own career and our organization's most thriving moment. We were just at the highest high. We were on the cover of the New York Times. We were talked about as DIY foreign aid, the success story. People were like taking our model and starting to replicate it. People were hopeful. Everyone believed and were supporting what we were doing. And I lost my son, and just the world went black. Everything went dark, and it was the greatest loss I think our family has ever suffered. And Ravi was special. He was, you knew him. He was here. And so anyway, I am suffering this horrible, unthinkable tragedy. I don't want to live anymore. I can't move. I can't breathe. I'm just like a caged animal. And I have to also leave the children. I need to get help. And it was just a really awful, horrible low. And I ended up needing counseling and grief counseling. And I'm probably like 29, 30 at this, 29, 28. And so luckily, I had the safety net of that beautiful town in New Jersey, and I go home, and there's snow on the ground, and I walk over to a grief counselor. And the grief counselor says, I killed my plants 2 weeks ago. First of all, she didn't promise it was going to be okay. She listened to me sob and shake, and then when I was ready to for her to say something, she said, I killed my plants a couple weeks ago. I left the door open in the back porch, and a freaky freeze storm came through, and all of my plants died. And there was no one in the world who looked like they loved their plants more than this therapist. She was a plant lover. And she treated her plants like her children. And she said they were all dead. They were gone. They were brown. They were just, there was not a speck of life on them. And everybody in her family and her neighbor were like, just throw the plants out. Bring them to the curb. Throw them in the dump. You'll get new plants. And she's like, no, I can't. And she watered the plants, and she talked to the plants, and she moved them in different spots in the sun on the porch. And one day, she looked at one of the plants, and there was this teeny tiny green speck, just a little flicker of life, a green, teeny tiny bud the size of an ant. And she said, when things are really dark and bad and you want to give up, and she'd had her own losses in life, you have to find and look for the little green specks. And there's also a little green speck inside of you. There's a piece of you that wants to keep living, that wants to keep going, that believes you'll have joy and laughter and music again, that believes in your children. And I need you to find that and look for it in the world. And once you find it, I want you to nurture it and talk to it like I talk to my plants, and believe that you'll get to the other side. You'll find your way through this, and it will never be better, it'll never be right, but you'll be able to continue. And there's something about that story that I've carried with me ever since, looking everywhere for the green specks, just living in wonder and looking for hope. And I left her office. I had lots of help. I needed lots of help. There's no shame in that at all. We all do. We all need help. And I decided that day that every day I was going to do one brave thing. And it started by I need to just get out of bed and leave my room, go to the bathroom, take a bath. I couldn't look at water. Have a drink of water was a brave thing, have a cup of tea. And I continued to do one brave thing. And one day I went to the grocery store and I got a jar of peanut butter. And another day I went to a yoga class. This was days and weeks. I saw my friend who had just had her baby. And on the after a long time of just one brave thing a day and nurturing myself through this process of grief, I had to go to LA for CNN Heroes, because when you win CNN Heroes, they bring all of the CNN Heroes together and you have to do this training, and they invest in your leadership development. And I'm there's no way I can get on that effing plane and go to LA to the sun, but I do. I was my one brave thing is that I'm gonna go and I'm gonna fight for this nonprofit and I'm gonna be okay and I'm gonna get myself back to work. So I get on the plane. I'll never forget it. When you check in, there's this horrible thing that it asks, are you traveling with an infant on your lap? And I was that's it, I'm out, I'm going home. And I didn't. I said no. And I got on the plane. And you'll never believe this, well, you will believe it because you know the story. But I go out that night, and one of my really good friends is can you come out tonight? I'm wrapping up a commercial, and we're all going out, and I need to see you. I want to hold you. And I was no, I'm not going out tonight. What are you talking about? But I do. I'm okay, one brave thing. I can go out. I can see people again. And that night, I went out, and I met my husband. Oh my God.
And it was electric.
Is this? It was electric. So I met my husband that night.
Jeremy.
It wasn't my husband right away. It took a long time. It took a long time. But I met my husband. So right in the book, when you're screw this, this sucks, this is the worst story in the whole world, there's a love story. Spoiler alert.
Oh, yeah. There are so many love stories in this book.
It's a book of love and loss and grief.
It's all the things. It's all the things.
Life
It's
is
life.
all the things.
Yes, life is all the things.
Nobody gets an easy shot at all of this, at any of this.
And so there's two things. I think we're going to probably go to questions. And I had a few more, but I won't ask them right now. So, but I do want to ask you to do one thing, and then we'll go to questions. And that is, we talked about you speaking in Nepali, speaking a message to your children, because this is being recorded, and they will maybe someday see it. Would you like to do that?
Yeah.
And we can do it after the question and answers if you like.
Ma timiharulai धेरै माया गर्छु अनि मलाई आशा छ कि यो दुनियाँमा शान्ति हुने. I think I just said my greatest wish for the world is that there's peace for you.
Oh, yeah. That's beautiful. So Sarah,
And I love you very much.
That's gorgeous.
Hi. Oh, hi. How did I meet my husband? Um, there's like a whole host of things that happened, but he was there that night. I was like, whoa, oh my gosh, there was like a recognition. And at the end of that conference, he was like, will you come to Joshua Tree with me and go hiking? And I said yes. And then right away, I mean, I basically like didn't leave his side from that moment on, and we ended up traveling back to Nepal together, because I was like, wait, whoa, if you like want to like do this thing, you need to meet my children and like know what you're getting into, and it's like in Nepal, it's really far away. This might look really great now, and he ended up flying back to Nepal with me. The kids loved him right away. And I think 6 months later, I heard the house, we were in Nepal, and I heard the house shake and cheer, and this just laughter, and he had asked the kids what they thought if he could marry me. And he proposed a little while later, and then we had our daughter. Really soon. He actually like really wanted to have a biological child also right away, and I did too, and it's in the book. You're gonna know so much about me that things you might not even want to know. Namaste. Yes. So the book is out on Audible, and I had to go record it in a studio, which was so hard. And it's in my voice. I was the voice in the book, and you can listen to it on Audible. It's actually available anywhere books are sold, and including Audible, Kindle, all the things, cover. But when I was doing the recording of the book, I had no idea how hard it would be. And you're in this like room in this sound booth all alone, and there's just like a piece of glass and a producer and a sound tech. And I was just like, ooh, it was way harder than I thought. And you'll notice if you read the book, each chapter you're along for the journey. And the sound tech and producer were like, we just got married. We're having a baby. And if you read it, you'll feel that sense of like, oh my gosh, this is happening right now. It's a very visceral journey, and you kind of hold my hand and you're there with me and you go through it. And I haven't listened to it yet because I don't know if I can handle that. It's voice, and I read it. Has anyone listened to the Audible? Oh, nice. Yeah. Thank you.
It's beautiful.
Ooh. Good hot tip right there. I love that.
Hi, Maggie Doyne.
Namaste, Doyne. Unfortunately, COVID, what we're looking at is a backslide when it comes to education, early marriage, child labor, violence against women. For us, I was in Nepal when COVID hit, and because of Nepal's, because of the way that the economy and being a victim of There were millions of migrant people across the Indian border that work paused, the world paused. And there's also a rock breaker is a daily wage laborer. So you make your $1 a day or $2 a day, and that's how you subside. That's how you take care of your family, and all of that stopped. So it just so happened that Surkhet was kind of at the entrance and the gateway to where the migrant trail was. And India didn't want to let the migrants home, and Nepal couldn't let the migrants in because they knew that if COVID came into rural Himalaya and Nepal, it would be catastrophic. So we were really uniquely situated in that we were able, as an organization, to be a voice for those millions of migrants and people and the situation that the country was in, but we had to figure out our first mass kind of development movement, and there were babies, children, and elders, and we had to kind of orchestrate bringing 5 million people back, making sure they were safe in quarantine centers, making sure that food banks were up and operating. I'll just talk loud. And yeah, that was COVID for us. Also, most of the world, we've had 300 million children out of school. And most of the world couldn't go to Zoom or tablet learning or have electricity in their house. Actually, school is the safe haven for most children around the world. And so we're in a really critical time as a human family where we have to come together more than ever. And my greatest wish is that we figure out how to do that. Because I think if we can join hands as a human family, and we can believe and have hope for a world at the end of all of this, where we can care for our children, that'll be. And so our vision is a world where every child is safe and educated and loved. And I believe and I know that this is possible in my lifetime. And I want to see this in my lifetime. And that this is a thing of history books. That, oh, there was a time when children were hungry. What is that? We have technology and the ability to come together. And I hope that we can figure this out. I know we will. And I think COVID was an obstacle. It was an obstacle. It was a hardship. But I hope that we leave this time and find a way to just join hands with each other. And enough of us working on these issues for children. Like, that's something we can all agree on. That's something we can all agree on. Children deserve to have basic human needs. We can all work on that. We can all take a step, no matter where we are, no matter what we're doing. Everybody can take that step, whatever that looks like for you. And I think what it looks like for me is believing that it's possible, believing that we can make our way through these times, and agree that we can do better for children. So, long answer to the complexities of COVID, but children have suffered, and in many ways, no matter which continent you were on, and we've got to roll up our sleeves and get some work done. What is going on?
Did you have? No, I think that wraps it up, I think.
Finish, I want to let everybody know that all of your books have been signed, but if you want to have it personalized in some way, you can line up at the back over here by this table, and Maggie will be in the back, and she can personalize your book, or if you bought one that wasn't signed, you can have the chance to do that. And I think we want to just take a moment to thank Karen and Maggie for being here.